Okay, the recording started.
But maybe I think Kaushik, it's good for Bernard and maybe is Eric also on the call. So they gave a lot of comments on the doc.
Yeah, I would like to hear from, I see Eric. I don't know if I see Bernard. Yeah, Bernard is here as well.
Yes, I
Yeah.
am.
Is the agenda today to go through the document, or is it, what is the, I thought Stephen was going to talk about seed code. What is the agenda today, Kaushik?
So two things, right? I just wanted to close the loop on Wim's last meeting where we didn't fully close on the CRD. So I'm just trying to level set if there's any further discussion. So based on what Wim just said, Eric, Bernard, like I heard you had a few offline comments with Wim on the document. Any further
No, not
inputs you would
offline.
like further discussions here?
They are in the document, Kaushik. It's not offline. I mean, yeah, it's offline, but it's in the document, so it's recorded in there. Plus the responses are there as well. Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure that we have some comments which were directly related to the original content from Wim, and those have been answered. But there are also at the end in sort of a section general comments, additional sort of thoughts, and those have not been addressed in the sense of how do we want to handle that. And I would be happy to get some feedback on that as well.
That's correct. Yes.
Yes, so yeah, I agree with Bernard. I think Wim, you answer most of our comments. I think I agree with that, but I think there's still some pending questions to be solved.
Yeah. So do you want us to go through that now, or?
No, you don't have to do that now. I just want to understand the process of how you would address those aspects in the future.
We will add that. I think I just because it was I see what I did. I only looked at the comments, not at the general comments part. But I'll reply to that as well. Sorry.
Yeah, because we agreed on saying sort of there's a part of comments and there are certain general aspects which would sort of be covered at the end of the document, and that we sort of have the chance of sort of also highlighting those which might not directly be related to the user story which we are addressing in R1.
Yeah.
Perfect. Hey, Wim, it doesn't look like I have comments access on the document. Maybe can you make sure all of the SIG1 members do have comment access? Let's follow offline on that one.
Okay, but okay, I'll put it as everybody who has a link so I think it should be fixed right now.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so next up, Stephen, do you want to give an update on the seed code from Google, fresh off the plate? We heard you say something, or?
Oh, you did? Does it work?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Oh, nice.
I thought you're
It hasn't
typing
been working for like the last 3 meetings or something. Seed code. So the seed code becomes available yesterday, as we said, and let me see. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So seed code becomes available last night. Send it out. There are 4 different repos. There are a common lib where the other 3 repos all have types that overlap. So we just put it there. It could be used in the future. I mean, lib is a very strong word because it's basically just typed. And then moving forward, I could foresee us actually putting more stuff on a common lib repo. There are 3 components that we open sourced from Google. So there's an Edge watcher, there's an NF deploy controller, and there's a watch agent. So those 3 things are being put out. So what are they? What does it do? So right now it's actually, so this is honestly product code. So this is early stage. It's, I would like to say, quite stable. So the test coverage is roughly 70-ish% across the board. Some of them reaches 90+. So test coverage is really good. And then they are being actively tested by Google systests. So they're stable. But then because it's stable, it's actually very simple. We made that change in a we made that code development in very early stage of Porch, something around, I would say, July, August last year. So there was no package conditions. Forget about package variants and stuff. So the simplicity of Porch is basically just a wrapper of Gig. So at this point, you see the NF deploy controller, which is right here. Oops. Which is right. Let me turn on the laser. Which is right here. Is basically doing the whole pipeline right now, which is not what we intended, and we expect to change that as we go along. The CLD is also very early stage. It doesn't integrate Vim. Forget about Vim's latest CLDs. It actually is the very early version of a 0.1 CLDs that I wrote a long time ago that we did present to a lot of customers. I think some of them are actually sitting in here right now, potential customers. And then we got various feedback. So it's actually extremely low level, if nothing else. It highlights a set of things that is needed for us to go from what we think is a high level intent to what could be consumed by the workload clusters operators. That would be, so we did not start with 3.5GC, by the way. So there is a particular vendor's network functions that we kind of model after. The UPF deployment also is different from the one we use currently in our code base, in that field code base. So over the next several weeks, there are some refactorings that we'll do, but then so right now it's extremely simple and it's going to change. NF deploy controller particularly is the thing that I think with different subgroups in SIG2, they're talking about different approaches on the hydration part. I would definitely expect that to change drastically. And then the deployment part is, so what is deployment? So hydration, I think most people pretty understand. That takes the high level intent and it goes down into even a per instance, per UPF instance type intent, our CLs, if you will, our custom resources, and various other things maybe in the future too, that would go into both workload cluster or even management clusters to do any kind of changes of the configurations, make it more and more clear so that Kubernetes can actually consume it, and then our operators or the Kubernetes built-in operators, built-in the resources handling controllers could handle whatever is actually being sent. So that's the hydration process. It's nothing, no mystery. We've been using that term throughout the community, and moving forward, that is the piece that are currently being drastically changed by SIG2, and then we'll adapt as we go, including the CLD, the user-facing CLD. The deployment part is the feedback part. So because it's a product, we care a lot about getting the feedback. Once if a user gives a high-level intent, the one reason behind NF deploy more than anything is it's not really, in a way, it's not really even declarative. I would even say it's more like a go button. It's like you have reference to many other things like the NF templates, the flavor that you're going to use, the connectivity models that you're going to have, which is very simple for us. It's basically just who the neighbor is. And it's actually instance-based, not unlabeled. But then the idea of NF deploy at that point is once you push NF deploy, it would actually start the whole thing. So it's not like detecting clusters or anything. It just actually go. So it's more like a go button for the users. So they can define a lot of other things a priori. And then at some point they said, oh, I see my network is in place, my clusters are in place. Let's go deploy. So that's actually what we do. And then so this CLDs is the simplicity. I think there are a lot of proposals where the user would be doing something very different. And we've demoed that to roughly 12, 13 potential customers after we did the POC, the internal, the product part. And users did have feedbacks. I mean, by and large, a lot of users didn't really have a lot potential. The telco side didn't really have a lot of feedback on what it is. But then for those who had, there are very different levels of abstractions they're looking at in terms of what they want to consume. Some of them can go as far as saying that I only give you subscribers, average throughput for subscribers, and the kind of oversubscription ratios that we're rating. And you should be able to create clusters and also deploy it once you actually consume those high-level intents, all the way down to someone who would tell us that, hey, you would we would have to explicitly tell you instance A and instance B is how we want to connect. So this SMF and this UPF explicitly are connected. That's why we do pretty much the lowest common denominator. It's very low level on that level. So anyway, so this is. But then because this gives us the entire model of this is a unit of deployment. So it may contain like N SMF and X UPFs and one instance of AMF and UDM and the USF and all the other things. Then that is actually the one unit that we're tracking. So this is where the deployment comes in. And consuming the NF deploy view of what is the group looks like. We in the seed code, you have to manually spin up Watcher agent. In our product, obviously, it's automatic. But then so if you spin that up, the deployment part, which now creates a graph, actually. So we build graphs for everything. There's a graph to actually understand the relationship between different objects. So right now it's different network function deployments. Moving forward, if you split up the NF deploy, the UPF deploy to have like interface objects and all that stuff, then all of those will be graphed, plotted into the system. And then
Question.
And then there's an actual. So go ahead. Someone saying something.
Can we ask, so regarding the relationships in the graph information, what kind of relationships are you capturing in this graph?
At this point, it's just connectivity. So because the unit, what are we capturing? So again, the current seed code, the hydration, the NF deploy controller is like a GATT controller. It takes the high level. It has the reference to high level intent. It also actually is the one that fans out all the low level intents. So it actually knows exactly how many UPF deployments and what they are. Mm-hmm. So in the Edge Watcher, in this case, there is a library inside deployment, which is implementation detail. It's basically a gRPC server. So in here, the moment it detects there's a new Edge cluster that comes up, there's a new workload cluster that comes up that is actually doing this. They would be sending them, these are the set of things that you're interested in. So let's say for this cluster, you deploy 2 instances of UPF. Usually you only do 1, but then let's say there are 2. So you're saying that you're watching UPF A and B, and then so Watcher agents would now be watching the status for those 2 UPF deployments. And then that CL also contains information about what gRPC server IP and port you're going to send something back to. So Watcher agent would be monitoring the statuses of those objects, and then upon changes, so it tracks whether or not change. So it only sends back to deployment or Edge Watcher when there's actually change occurs. So when the change happens, it sends it back to them. So in this case, you update so your graph is, let's say you have a UPF that connects to 2 SMF, just for redundancy reasons and stuff, or actually you want 2 of them to service them. Then the graph points to SMF. They're actually propagated up to
Understood. Okay.
SMF. So in that case, if an SMF lose connectivity or something like that, then we can propagate the, if you will, root cause of like, why is UPF suddenly getting such a low throughput? Or is it not receiving new sessions? Is it an SMF problem, or is it like a UPF itself problem? So we'll be able to walk through that potentially. So we haven't done that yet, but yes.
Just an addition, sort of, is there any thought of exposing or exporting this information for the service assurance part, or is that not?
So it does today anyway. Yeah. So what it does today is it takes those statuses and aggregates them and give, to be honest, very simplistic aggregated results to NF deploy. So if you do a kube control describe NF deploy instance on the management clusters, you actually see that many successful statuses. Let's say it's 5G core, so it's not like a very large number, but imagine RAN, right, in the future. So for X number of instances, you'll see that, maybe 70% of them are now up and running. So it won't do that now for operators, but in the future, because our capacity is one of our intents. So for UPF, maybe, we wouldn't be able to reach that throughput for whatever reasons, because CPU is all hot right now. And then that status may be propagated up, and then it will be aggregated at this level, and then be put into a summary status, exposed to the user. Do we actually go? So right now it's very, in a way, it's rebloated, because we actually keep a shadow copy of each status. So you will be able to, from the management cluster, dig into the detailed status. But then obviously you don't really have to, because you can kube control into the edge cluster if you want to moving forward. But then for now, it's actually there. So you'll be able to see not only something could be wrong here, but then you'll be able to pinpoint exactly which particular instance has the status actually flagging down at that moment.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, An, I guess you're next.
Quick question. The watcher agent,
Mhm.
is that really a kubelet, or is that a super kubelet, or is that a separate
Oh, no,
component?
it's a operator.
Oh,
It's an
oh,
operator.
okay.
So it operates on the CL that we sent to them in this case.
Okay, got it.
And what it does on the other side would be, it was giving permissions to read statuses out of the namespaces that where you deploy your network functions. So it would basically
Okay.
just be reading that status. The
Okay,
CL already
got it.
tell them exactly which status from which instance at which namespace you're actually interested in. So they'll actually just grab it, and then it tracks a copy. I mean, we can improve moving forward, but it tracks a copy to compare, so that only if a change. So it periodically, status is not something you pull.
Yeah.
You pull on the spec, not the status. So you read it periodically, and then if there's any changes, it would actually only send change status up. I mean, obviously initial one sends up, and then if there's any changes, it would propagate up to the edge watcher.
And we can specify the type of status, right? Or extend what you have right now.
Yes. So it's a CL. So yes, sure. You can
Cool.
instead of using edge watcher, you can manually do that. Actually, I do that today for testing. So you can
Okay.
you can write the custom resource and apply it directly onto the edge watcher on the edge cluster, and in which case you can send more statuses up. Whether or not it's on the graph, probably may or may not be the case, in which case NF deploy would not be exposing that status, but you'll be able to see it from
Okay.
edge watcher. In terms of edge watcher exposing something, so that may be missing. So if you want to do like offline things that isn't triggered as part of the pipeline and still be able to collect that status, we may want to be able to pull into NF deploy. NF deploy is going to probably be split up anyway. So if deployment becomes its own controller, then maybe we have to expose that status, collect, even if it doesn't go to the graph, into something on the kube control describe.
Yeah,
Forward.
because in my experience, based on what Bernard asked, the additional data is usually there's more status wanted, counters, when things like that.
Well, I mean, the operator collects
Okay.
metrics, hopefully.
Yeah.
So it doesn't do it today for FreeBSD at least. So collect metrics to see whether it meets the intent. That metrics is available anyway. I would imagine like Prometheus or something. And then so you can correlate. So a status get changed at time X, this timestamp, obviously. And then you can go to Prometheus and look for it. Should we build tools to make that easier? And that could be a piece of product. It could be Matthew. We can see how it goes in the future.
Yeah, future releases.
Yeah, but then we're not collecting
that's
metrics
cool.
per se. We're collecting statuses at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think that that's actually a really good point you just brought up. It wasn't my main point, but I'll follow on. like status is not metrics, right? So metrics is much higher volume, particularly and much more granular and detailed. And so we want to differentiate between those things. This is kind of we have multiple levels of status. There's like has intent been realized, has intent been applied, has intent been realized, and then maybe there's some sort of health status that's a summary, but it's not going to have all the granularity. And kind of the original point I wanted to bring up was, I think we need to take a note of what Bernard said, because like this is where we start to talk about the system interfaces between Nephew and existing systems. All of this stuff is in the Kube API server, so it's all accessible. So in the sense of, is it exportable? I mean, sure, it's an API that you can query. And, you know, I guess it just kind of emphasizes the point that right now in R1, every single one of our CRDs is alpha V1, alpha 1, very early. We're not having stability guarantees right now, but it won't be that long when if somebody wants to put this into production, we're going to need to fix those APIs so that they can rely on those integration points. And I just wanted to make sure we took note of that. But I also wanted to mention that, like, we have to be careful. The Cube API server is not what I would consider highly scalable. It's based on etcd, which is, you know, 1 million entries is a lot for etcd. So, and for most, I imagine, systems, like for a metric system, that's like a trivial quantity. So, you know, we have to use the right tool for the right thing. So we should be, so that's what I mean by we're not going to have metrics level volume, but we have this sort of high level.
No, we don't do that. So this is status aggregations. We would imagine that if you detect a status change, you go to your metric systems and see and gather data. This is the status would not be able to debug your problem right away. It will tell you that a problem has occurred, and then go to log servers, trace servers, or your metric servers, and go figure out what it is.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Sorry to jump in, but essentially both of you are saying that the metrics will be through a separate subsystem for monitoring and traceability.
I would imagine, yeah.
Okay,
Metrics
cool.
and logs, separate systems for sure.
Yeah.
It's also best practice highlighted by CNCF. So we would expect that. Yeah. Go
Okay.
ahead, Vin.
Thanks.
Yeah, well, I was just going to add upon it. I think what we are doing in Nephew is CRDs is automation. We will give status on how the automation is doing, but we are not an assurance platform, right? So if you really want to have assurance, you actually have a subsystem next to it that does the collection. But yeah, I was just going to amplify what the other people say. But if you talk about assurance, we do assurance for the automation. So let's say we will tell, I think that's what the watchers are doing as far as I could look into the code to say, okay, this deployment actually works or it doesn't work. And we will give as much information as we can. But if you really want to get the nitty-gritty details, you probably have to go to another subsystem to find out what is the nitty-gritty details, what's going on.
Yeah, we're not going to update statuses out of like how many packets has been switched on that interface type stuff. No.
The critical thing, however, is that we need to track the management information so that those external service assurance systems can understand what information is available where and reach it.
Yeah.
Yes.
100%. Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead, Kaushik.
Hey, this is somewhat bleeding into the execution plan, but from my sense is the CRDs that Wim has presented are quite different than or somewhat different than the seed code, right? CRD. So does SIG2 have a plan of action of how to make the changes to the seed code to bring compatibility to the CRDs that have been proposed?
Execution.
So I can answer some of it.
Vim, go ahead.
not everything. I think the piece where we at the moment deviate the most, where it's the biggest, let's say, deviation from what I see, Stephen, is the NF deploy, right? So it's basically the top, like the topology, which we kind of scratched a little bit. Below, we still use UPF deployment, SMF deployment, AMF deployment, which is where the watcher is worked upon, right? From what I see. But such, that part is still there. What we need to do, I think the thing that we have to sort out is how do we bridge the gap from that, let's say, feedback loop towards a high level object that contains or that would represent NF deploy or the topology somehow. So that's, I think, the thing that we have to sort out. Apart from that, I don't see major changes.
Yeah, so we all know this part is going to change a lot.
Yeah.
It probably split out. I mean, NF deploy controller may not even exist. It may actually be just a hydration things that I think John and Wim are now talking about, even function based, not even controller. But then the deployment piece, somehow you'll be able to get a unit of deployment informations get propagated into this other controller that will be happening. It's like, let's call it Edge Watcher, easier to think. The Edge Watcher controller would be sitting there and get an intent of saying that let's start tracking this as a single unit. And then we'll build it. And then the code would be largely unmodified, I would imagine. From that.
And there we did not do major changes, I think, Stephen, right? From what I
I don't think there would be a lot of changes. I mean,
No, correct.
there's some for sure, but then there won't be a lot.
It's basically
The
where we
core logic will be pretty similar.
where we deviate is at the top. We went to this whole package system, right? So that makes it way more composable and easier to do. That's where we deviate the most. From the moment you look at what the interface to the workload cluster, we are pretty much the same. There will be maybe a few deviation, but they are not major.
Yeah, so for our one, as I said, for our one, this gets split. This may or may not exist anymore. There could be a bunch of functions and things. And then the fan out what happens by package variant.
Yeah, I think there's some we're gonna have to figure out a little bit. There's some details to work out. Like right now, we don't apply a UPF deployment object to the management cluster. It's just a
that doesn't either.
Revision. Okay. Okay.
That does not. It
So
understands
we
what it looks like, but then it doesn't apply it. No, it's on the Edge deployment repo.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll have to drill into the code too. We'll work that through. Kaushik, I think in the last TSC, you asked specifically about execution plans, so I did start working on that. But you know, Stephen hasn't had a chance to look at it. Wim hasn't seen it. Like timeline's super short, so it's pretty aggressive, and you know that needs to be communicated, I think, to the rest of the community here in the next day or two. But you know, and it hasn't really, because I wrote it, it didn't take the SIG code into account so far. So that's what I need to work with Stephen on.
I'll look at it and I'll update it based on SIG code then.
Yeah, he's been a little busy with this. We'll look at that and then we'll share that with the community this week to see what people think. It's, like I said, kind of aggressive, but we have to be with only 2 months really to do our stuff.
2 months away. That's right.
Yeah. I think Ravi was next.
Ravi, go ahead.
Yeah, just one question. So with respect to service assurance, because in the CRD, there is definitely I see there is a intent for capacity uplink and downlink throughputs and so on. So I'm assuming that those things are not going to be instance monitored
tracked at this point.
Yeah, at this point, I guess.
Yeah, probably not our one. I don't think we have to load to kind of make it like deviates or test 3.5GC. Testing 3.5GC is not the intent, I guess, in a way, for the community. Yeah. So I mean, we would like to see that happening, but then for our one, I don't think so. Yeah.
No, eventually, because I was thinking about, how do you connect? Because once you start looking at throughputs, and then you're also looking at probably other 3GPP metrics and stuff, and so then I think all those other systems also comes into consideration.
And this is a job of the operator, so it's not the network functions switch packets, the UPF switch packets in this case, and then the monitoring is actually from the operator in this case. It would be looking at different situations. If you add 50% of throughput, but then you figure that it's already 100% CPU, then obviously you wouldn't be able to meet the intent. Then the operator make that decisions and propagate that on the status.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to understand. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah.
On?
Quickly, in the R1 slide, the link to the doc is crop off. So do you mind posting it?
It doesn't matter because I haven't shared. I'll share that right after this. But yeah, I'll give it to you guys. Yeah, it's a Google drawing. You see the drawings in there. It's a Google drawing, especially this drawing.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Kaushik.
Yeah, I mean, somewhat kind of extending Ravi's scenario and what you folks had said, right? We'll need to more deliberately understand the difference between monitoring versus status reconciliation assurance, because especially when you include additional capabilities like beyond capacity, like whatever we have today, right? The number of interfaces, the topology, the capacity, and so forth, right? Do you measure drift at each of those attributes of the CR? Because that is now going very deep into the functioning of the network function, which is not necessarily the kind of assurance that you would expect to provide, right? From a, let's say, NF deployment kind of a scenario. But then it's important for the network function capability itself. So is there a separate monitoring system? Like, how do you demarcate where the boundary lies? I think it will be especially important. Also true for R1, but especially more for beyond R1.
So the intent of the status is at some point we should report that this deployment has not met that intent. So we're not going to go every step of the way and saying that we're hitting 30% at this capacity and 40% CPU at this capacity, or our network bandwidth is on the choke point. I mean, we're not reporting every step of the way. We're not like a metrics reporting system. But then if we are getting to a point where the operators decided, based on what the community agree on as a status, that this deployment is about to fail, basically, we need another. Basically, something like I need another instance of UPF just to do this, or something like this. Then we probably get it up. Go ahead.
So our automations can integrate with our metric systems, so we can differentiate. So for example, one of the things eventually we want to do post R1 is a kind of rollout automation. So what that means is that we have 20 clusters or 20 regions, say 20 sites. We roll out first to one site, we monitor it. When I say we monitor it, that doesn't mean all the data for monitoring is flowing back through Nefio. Some of that may be flowing to a metric system, but we have an integration point that our rollout controller can look at. Okay, the status intent has been realized, meaning the workload is there and Kubernetes thinks everything's okay. That's basically the layer. Everything application specific flows through the metric system. And then we can put into that rollout controller, we can integrate with the metric system and put if it's Prometheus, you put a PromQL query right in the resource that says, when this PromQL query has succeeded and showed, less than 0.01% errors for, 6 hours straight, we can roll out to the next thing, whatever it is. So that's kind of my thinking about it, but you're right that there's going to have to be a lot of better understanding of what operators do today, what their assurance systems need today, where the line is useful for them to draw, right? I don't know those things really.
Yeah, it also depends on the scope of the CLD. So in this case, we have the unit of deployment. We have a deployment instance, and then when do we say that this instance is succeeded versus is not? So that's what we want to decide. And then status obviously is like need attentions also. So that kind of a signal that we want to send. Is An also next again?
Yeah, sorry, I have another question.
Okay.
Is it better to think of approaching this as the separation where the agents and all the work that is doing is on the control plane, management, deployment, and then what you, Bernard and Kaushik had mentioned is more of a data plane status monitoring. So that's the separation in my head. I just wanted confirmation.
Well, I mean, for SMF and AMF, there's no data plane, right, per se.
But
more so one is more for deployment based on also this is meeting your requirement. So we do capacity. So for now, so that's a capacity requirement is there. If it's any other things like protocols not working and things like that, we're not detecting that for now.
Yeah. So the separation is deployment.
So very deep application specific things. Our CLD is not covering for now, anyway, and therefore we wouldn't be able to report that status.
And those deep application metrics counters and whatnot are really the monitoring subsystem that's separate from this, the service assurance subsystem that is separate from Nefio for now.
Yeah. So Nefio is not. Yeah, Nefio is not building one of those for now.
Okay, cool.
Or for a very long time at least.
So one thing you could do and this is like where you could deploy probes, data plane level probes that are executed across your fleet, but that would be like almost a separate type of workload. that you might deploy in separate ways. You might even deploy them to clusters that you're not running those functions on. And, but that's kind of up to that. I don't know how service assurance is done today by the operators in these kind of environments. So
yeah, I'm approaching from a DPU point of view where DPU put out a lot of metrics and counters, but that is collected through OTel, right? Open telemetry and subsystem and all that.
Yeah, we're not substituting that for sure.
Yeah, we're not substituting that.
We're not
Cool, thanks.
we're not even per se interfacing with that.
Yeah,
and
that's
if the operator does, that's their problem. Yeah.
But John said that in the future we may selectively integrate with some for some of those metrics.
Right. We might build a controller that says that gets a
Yeah.
signal from these systems to know to scale or something like that. But it's
Yeah, because the network function will most likely eventually sit on network SmartNIC and network DPU, right? So that's what I was thinking. But thanks.
Bernard, go ahead.
So I tend to differentiate between lifecycle information or status information and the functional information related to performance metrics, etc. And what is important for me is to be able to determine also the topology based on what's happening during the life cycle. That means sort of it's not only about, yes, so I finished and now you can do the monitoring and service assurance part, but it's about sort of how do these things relate to one another, because otherwise I have thousands of probes sort of collecting information and I do not have the capability to correlate them in a meaningful way. And so therefore I was asking about these relationships and wondering if we could somehow get this topology information also handed over to the service assurance system so that they can sort of support impact analysis and root cause analysis type of activities based on this information as well.
Okay. Yeah, that would be, the way to expose that for sure. Yes.
Whatever we have will expose kind of the way we're at least in R1 talking about doing it. The topology becomes a little bit implicit as opposed to explicit. So like in the drawing on the diagram right now, you've got this NF deploy controller where topology is a little more explicit. We may want to in R2 or R3 build explicit topologies, graphs, and as opposed to doing it implicitly in the packages. But we're going to kind of try this in R1 and see, but that may be insufficient for your needs there. So I think that's a good.
That's why we need SIG 1 to give us what is needed. The circles back to that. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah.
Go ahead, Wim. Sorry.
Yeah. So I mean, probably this needs a lot more discussion, I believe. But what I've seen from my experience is the following, right? Is that typically you have a single metric system, right, that collects information, right? And for example, if you go to like netconf and GNMI and stuff like that, you basically can extract all those metrics from those network functions, whether it's DPU, CPU, and stuff like that, because that's the system that they define. Now, what you see is that, okay, that those metrics are typically consumed. So we are talking mainly about intent at the moment in Nephew, right? So like really ISO intents that do stuff. What I've seen, and there is a set of, let's say, standardization bodies that looked at this, that basically say, as part of my intent, okay, we know the status because we know how the deployment is, but there are a set of metrics that are relevant to basically determine the status of the intent itself. So meaning what we call inside of Nokia, the health of the intent, which is not only contained from information that we have natively in Kubernetes, but is also a tie-in into the generic metric system. Not all the metrics, like counters, for example, doesn't count. But for example, you could say, hey, I have a bunch of CRC errors here, so much within this interval. So the metric system will tell you the interface is actually down. So these type of integration would be probably interesting for us to look at going forward, because they will tell you, okay, the deployment, what I'm trying to say is that we don't need to necessarily have all the metrics, but there is a metric system next to us that we could integrate with that helps us to determine what is the, let's say, high-level statuses of that deployment and to give some context without going into the nitty-gritty detail. I think that's I've seen being potentially relevant as a system architecture.
Just one question. I hope I'm not jumping the queue here. Because we within Nephew we also have a scope for OEM. I mean, for the configuration, service configuration itself, right? Which is tightly now you could say that okay, I'm configuring the UPF for certain deployment, and then and then you have this intent on capacity and so on. And then you would have to close the loop eventually, right? I mean, saying that, okay, I still have to tap into these, say, entry level metrics or N4 or N6 or N9 level metrics, which goes into the 3GPP turf anyway. So is that eventually part of the scope beyond R1? Just trying to understand, because I know there's one of the pillars there is also about network function config. We touch the service as such too, not just a deployment.
Yeah, once we hit day 2, I would imagine that swim lane is going to kick in for sure.
Correct.
Okay.
And in terms of whether or not we would have to rely a lot on either 3GPP standard metrics or things to reflect on the fulfillment of the intent, it's a use case thing. So I can't say that for sure. I would imagine some of it for sure. I would imagine we would have to tap on it.
Yeah, because that's a direction I see even with Vim CRs. I see there's deployment with this private 5G macro outdoor whatnot, right? I mean, it kind of goes into the specific service needs there. So just wanted to see what the opinion was. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we sort of expect it, but then we'll see how it goes. Okay, so I think well, so that's a formal introduction of the Google Seed code. Is welcome to download. All the parts comes up. I'm going to talk about that on the 6.3 meetings. It doesn't work 100%. Part of that is because I can give some preview since there's not a lot of 6.3 people in the call right now. Some of the thing is there has to be some sort of cloud integration points. Right now, for example, that goes into a lot of details. The Edge Watcher uses an IP address that is actually the pod IP. That works because we create a VPN link, so the IP address is exposed. The VPN router knows how to route it. So for Nephew, it would our Nephew cloud, our test infrastructure would have to create those integration points to verify that those are working. And then another reason why we would like to do those things in the community instead of like doing it in Priora, because the test infrastructure is not really done yet anyway for 6.3, and then 2, we would like to, as a community, figure out what those integration points are. If we move from which right now it's not, I wouldn't say tightly coupled, but then there are some coupling with the Google infrastructure to the next thing, which is either generic or going to a different cloud providers or different some OpenShift or VMware type stuff, then we'll like to identify those integration points also. But they run. You can do a MIG test, and you'll see a test coverage is beautiful. I mean, it's kind of nice to see code with unit tests all nicely placed together. The parts are up when you deploy them, and well, I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to do before then. And not in terms of running the pod, but obviously make it functional. You also have to create, you have to bring up Porch first, and then you have to create the repos and register with Porch. So all those basic things are still in place. You can do with the Ansible scripts sort of with our O&E Summit, but then it's not a very one-shot environment right now for you to test this. So give us some time before we get to there. Not as a community, not just because of the Z code, but in general, to run Nephew, we still want to make it a little simpler than what it is today. So that's what it is. And that is it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And just for context, this is a work that many engineers at Google had been doing over the last many months. I hope the community can take this and build upon it. Hopefully use a good portion of this towards R1 and beyond. So look forward to all of you from SIG1 and other SIGs to help start and contribute and extend this code. Okay, so we have got 5 minutes left. Just a couple updates. One, logistics. John helped create a Git repo and a project board. We should align how we use these tools, meaning Google Docs in Drive versus Git repos versus project board. We should stay consistent across the 6. So John, I will work offline with you in making sure, and you and Stephen, let's say, or SIG2 and SIG3 to make sure we understand how you use it. We did touch base in the cross-SIG meeting, and starting next week onwards, I will at least do the homework to port some of the finalized content to the repos, link it off of the wiki and so forth, right? The links to the project board and to the repo are linked off of the agenda meeting notes document. I will ping that here for everyone's reference. So that's on logistics. One other thing I wanted to remind people, a couple weeks ago, we had discussed about a proposal of somewhat looking at a broader scope for SIG1, and which was looking at, hey, not just the high level user stories, but also looking at network architecture, right? Especially the telcos and vendors that participate here. Somewhat, somewhat different from the SIG2's focus, which is more around software architecture and automation and so forth. So we'll put a proposal together, especially in some of these discussions around how should Nefio intersect with service assurance, with matrix systems, with let's say end-to-end service orchestration and so forth, right? I think it'll be good to present a more overarching view, which is longer term, and then we can start to interplay which of these layers intersect with the different releases, right? So please, we will, Sanai and I will share this, document as a draft with this group in terms of what the proposed roles and responsibilities are. We'll also share it with the SIG2 so that we can ensure there are no conflicts and overlaps in terms of the responsibilities. That was one. Second thing, maybe logistically, I would request people to, we need to start using the tracker, which was the agenda tracker that we had put together. I can present it. How do I, where's the presentation mode in Zoom?
Share screen at the bottom.
There should be a big green button in the bottom that says share screen. Somehow it's not visible, even though they made it green. It just, you still look, it's still hard to see. You're muted now because it shared you. It shared your tab audio because
Hold on.
So when you do the share screen, you have to uncheck the little box that says share tab audio.
Yeah, I remember. Okay, so this one is the agenda tracker that we had put, and the goal is to vote on the topics so that we can identify the speakers and line them up. One request that we have received, which I will edit here, is in SIG2, there was a Helm support for Nefio, and the person requested review. I will try to schedule it for the subsequent session, but then request everyone to please take a look at this. Please vote for the topics of interest. I would like to slowly start curating the agenda so that we are a little bit forward looking beyond Arvind, because I would like SIG1 to start to explore what should be the next set of things based on some of these discussions. So we should start to define the user stories for the next set of things, assuming R1 gets delivered in, let's say, 2 to 3 months from now. So request everyone to at least upvote, add new areas or topics of interest to you. And then Sanai and myself will curate and will work with the relevant speakers to get it scheduled.
And this is all linked from the agenda document, right? You're on mute again.
Yes, all linked from the agenda doc, yes.
Yeah. By the way, there was also, I think, Bernard at some point. We have been, I'm not sure whether it's still relevant or not. So Bernard should speak up, but we at some point he was on the agenda, but then we moved him out all the time. So I just wanted to, Bernard should speak up, but it's
I think Bernard and Vance
Yeah.
both got
Yeah.
moved.
So maybe sort of, we've been trying to sort of explain the overall user's journey. That means sort of we've been now focusing on the user journey for R1. That's fine. But if we want to have a more comprehensive view on sort of what needs to be addressed, we sort of had some user journeys. I've also seen from Orange sort of input regarding that. And I believe having this sort of a more comprehensive view would make sense so that we know in which direction we would gradually evolve with our activities. And that's why I believe it makes sense to come to a conclusion of what that should look like.
Okay, so Bernard, again, please, maybe if you would, is the topic already listed on this agenda document?
I'm not quite sure. I could combine it with the Laufzettel concept, but I sort of, actually, we wanted to complete these user journeys, and there was sort of this notion of Sana saying, oh, she only was able to present her part, but we weren't able to sort of address those inputs from the other operators, and that's why I was thinking that this would be put on the agenda as well at some point.
Understood. So maybe Bernard, if you could just update the sheet, we can.
I can do that.
Offline.
Yes, I can do that.
Yeah,
yes.
Perfect. Thank you. And lastly, I see some commentary around ONAP, ORAN, and so forth. That will be part of the proposal, which is from a network architecture. How should SIG1 start to intersect with other communities out there, and we should then start to more proactively have engagements with those communities. So the proposal should also help outline that. All right, we are at time. Any parting comments, anyone? Thank you. See you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, thanks, Coach.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.